Much like the original video game that it is based on, the planet we live in is currently experiencing an outbreak. No, not the one that we just had, nor one plagued by deadly fungus. It's an outbreak of fascination over the newest and hottest series right now, HBO's The Last of Us. Now, while gamers may already have an idea about the incredible and thrilling plot, many viewers of the ongoing series are currently having an enlightenment of sorts to the fascinating story that the series is based on. Here are 10 things that you didn't know about The Last of Us. Best video game adaptation so far. Now, if you didn't already know, HBO's The Last of Us series is based on the massively popular video game of the same name. The post-apocalyptic game was developed by gaming studio Naughty Dog, the same developers of other successful games including Crash Bandicoot and Uncharted. While many consider most live-action adaptations of video games to be quite disappointing, showrunners of The Last of Us made sure to maintain a tight adaptation to stay true to the source material. The game is highly driven by narrative and character development, and so far the adaptation feels just as natural. This is why fans of the games have come in droves, expressing their love and support for the series, as it is an absolute joy to witness the drama and action from the games brought to life in a manner that has far exceeded expectations. Seasons of the show represent individual games. The Last of Us games have two major iterations so far, The Last of Us Part 1 and 2, along with significant downloadable content additions. The HBO series is structured to match these games, so that Season 1 will cover the game's Part 1 with story elements from the downloadable content The Last of Us Left Behind, potentially being included in the show, while the second season will include the events of The Last of Us Part 2. There have been consistent rumors that a Part 3 game is already in development, which would further expand the storyline for the show as well. Suffice to say, this indicates that much of what the end would be remains to be unknown, and so viewers and gamers have much to look forward to. Stars of the show are Game of Thrones breakthrough actors. HBO's The Last of Us features an array of impressive and recognizable characters among its cast, from Gabriel Luna of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.'s Ghost Rider fame, who plays Tommy in the show, to comedic actor Nick Offerman with his powerful rendition of Bill in the now iconic third episode. Of course, the stars of the show, Bella Ramsey and Pedro Pascal, were both also veteran actors from another iconic series, Game of Thrones. Both actors have had quite an impressive resume already, but both achieved epic levels of fame after appearing on Game of Thrones. Pedro Pascal was the charming and enigmatic Prince of Dorne, Oberyn Martell, while Bella Ramsey was the precocious and powerful young Lady Lyanna Mormont. Both actors made their mark on GOT and rose to become fan favorites, with another link for the two also being their quite memorable and gruesome deaths in the show. More expensive than Game of Thrones. Establishing realistic environments and creatures in this video game adaptation is no joke, with The Last of Us being among the most expensive TV shows to make. According to The New Yorker, HBO gave the series a budget exceeding that of each of the first 5 seasons of Game of Thrones. It can be remembered that Game of Thrones was among the highest budget on a per-episode basis within its last seasons, with one episode, Season 6's The Battle of Bastards, having had a budget of $11 million. The Last of Us Season 1 is estimated to be costing producers around $100 million, allotting a budget of probably around $10 to $15 million per episode. This includes creating a highly realistic built world that seems unbuilt and rebuilt for the show's environment, as well as impressive video effects and CGI. From the massive empty cityscape backdrops to mushroom-looking creatures built with prosthetics. To recreate the iconic monsters from the video game, the show tapped award-winning prosthetic designer Barry Gower from Game of Thrones, the man responsible for the Night King and the other undead in the show. Chernobyl showrunner. Fans of the video game became more hopeful and confident with the live-action adaptation when it was announced that the original video game creator, Neil Druckmann, was going to be behind it. More affirmation would later be given when it was revealed that the show would be co-created by successful Hollywood writer Craig Mazin. Mazin wrote a couple of the Scary Movie series and the sequels to The Hangover, as well as being behind the highly acclaimed miniseries Chernobyl. Penning a post-apocalyptic disaster isn't that far from a nuclear incident, with the familiar notes of anxiety and tension filling the visual dead space. Chernobyl won 2 Emmys, with Mazin winning the Outstanding Writing for a Limited Series Award, providing The Last of Us with the same writing caliber that we can expect from the award-winning writer. Mazin also showcases his rare array into directing when he directed the first episode of the Last of Us series entitled When You're Lost in the Darkness. Video game detachment. To detach themselves from falling into a pattern of imitation, actors who were cast for the show were told not to play the games while they were preparing for their characters. Apparently, the showrunners didn't want the co-leads, particularly Bella Ramsey and Pedro Pascal, to be too preoccupied with imitating the existing source material, while also having to face the pressures of set expectations from the video game's fan base. While it seems that the suggestion has been great for the show so far, allowing its actors to have their own take at the characters, Pedro Pascal admitted in an interview that he had ignored instructions to avoid the game. He said that it was vital for him to play notes that were in the game, and that he could only explore Joel's character by playing him in the game. He would also realize that he actually sucked at the game and would pass the controller to his nephew while he observed. Many familiar tones. The main showrunner of the show, Neil Druckmann, also happens to be the video game's original creator, making him the proper man behind the helm. This means that many aspects from the beloved video game will surely somehow find its way into the live-action adaptation. From precise angles of certain shots to exactly the same scenarios, the show will make sure that it stays loyal to the original material. Another way to make sure that they stay true to the video game is by adding one of the most important aspects from the game come into the show, which is the game's original music. Fans of the video game know the levels of anxiety and thrill the tones of music add to The Last of Us feels, with the same feels and tones to be used for the show as well. The original composer to the game's music, Gustavo Santaella, created this music for The Last of Us based on the story and its themes with complete creative freedom. This allowed him to experiment with instruments he has never used before. From recording in a bathroom to detuning a guitar to achieve a certain tone, he also provided the score to genius filmmaker Alejandro Inarritu's Babel and Beautiful. Certainly knows how to entice emotion with every musical note. Video game actors. Now, another thing that fans of the video game are excited about is the fact that the show will have plenty of recognizable voices and faces. The live-action adaptation features video game voice actors to reprise their roles for the show. Characters like Marlene, played by Merle Dandridge, has more visible on-screen roles, while voice actors for the clicker zombies have lent their voices for the terrifying creatures once again. Fungus. Early in the show's first episode, we are introduced to the main premise that the possibility of an outbreak by a mutated fungus may be possible. In fact, the cordyceps fungus from the show is actually real. The fungus is capable of hijacking an insect's motor functions, controlling it to find a vantage point and get to the best spot before releasing more of its spores. In the show, the same type of fungus evolves to infect humans, causing the zombie outbreak that plagues humanity. Not the first. Many fans are thrilled and satisfied with what the show has become so far, but it wasn't too long ago that a different live adaptation was in the works. Once upon a time, The Last of Us was set to be made into a full feature film. Back in 2014, Sony Pictures tried to put up a movie version of the massive game that had been released a year prior, with Sam Raimi, the director of the Spider-Man trilogy, set to be behind the project. The movie never made it off the ground, and fans are rather thankful for it. At the time, video game adaptations, much like Resident Evil, were in play and popular, and The Last of Us producers simply didn't want the property to become another one of those movies. So what do you think about the 10 things that you didn't know about The Last of Us?